Ladies and gentlemen, it is Game 10 of the World Chess Championship 2016, Magnus Carlsen against Karjakin. Three more games to go, the world champion trailing behind by 1 point, and today with the white pieces, one of his two chances, one could say, to come back into the match because he has only 2 white games left. So this is the full analysis. If you would like to see just the highlights, then just click on the link in the description, we'll lead you right there. But here I cover the whole game and I would say we get started. Carlsen with the white pieces and also just like Karjakin returning to 1e4 again. And Karjakin sticking to his weapon here, the Berlin defense, knight of 6. Now we see an anti-Berlin. In a previous game, Carlsen had played castle, I believe it was the 3rd game. But here he plays the anti-Berlin variation d3. And is more typical of Roy Lopez positions. Bishop c5, c3, castle. And here, maybe the first slight surprise for Karjakin, bishop g5. This move is not seen that often, because usually white doesn't want to commit to putting a bishop there so early, but Carlsen had prepared this particularly. So h6, just asking the bishop to decide on which diagonal he will stay, and bishop h4, keeping this pin going. And now black actually decides to go bishop e7 back to unpin this knight, because could be sometimes unpleasant. And whenever you go g5, well, that you could think about that once white has castled already, since then white couldn't push his pawns forward there. But as long as the bishop as long as the king is on e1, well, then after a move like g5, also in sometimes you need to consider knight takes g5. But here, white can push these pawns and possibly castle queenside, and then it wouldn't be a good idea to weaken the king like that. So bishop e7, a very sensible move by Karjakin, very solid move. Castle, now d6, knight bd2, and now Karjakin actually goes knight h5, exchanging the pair of bishops, and also bring the knight closer to square f4, on which the knight is landing right here. Now an important difference that has to be pointed out, in many positions that we see in the Roy Lopez or in this kind of structure, white has already played h3. And it's important here that white hasn't played h3, because that allows him to go g3 and always be able to kick this knight away from f4. Imagine with the pawn h3, then would be much more difficult because this pawn would be always hanging. So that's an important characteristic of this position. But no rush yet. White plays knight e3. This is a perfect square for the knight. Queen f6, which is preparing knight e7. Now g3, knight h3 check, and king h1. Personally, I would put the king on g2. I'm not sure what the reasoning was for Carlsen to put a king on h1, but I'm sure he had some kind of reason, obviously, because king g2 is more natural. Knight e7, just improving the position of the knight, preparing also c6 followed by d5 potentially. Bishop c4, stepping out of c6 already, black plays it anyway. Bishop b3, knight g6, queen e2, a5, black is winning some space on the queen side, and white answers a4, not allowing black to go a4 himself. Now bishop e6, and here Carlsen took on e6. He could have also played knight d2, but the position in general, I mean, we have a lot of pieces on the board and not a single pair of pawns has been exchanged, but it is roughly equal. I mean, the knight on h3, it can always come back into the game, and here, well, black takes on b3, and can go knight g5 now, or play another move. And of course there is potential here in the position, but this is equal. This is about equal. It's also equal after bishop takes e6. F takes e6, opening up the f file. Now this knight obviously is hanging, and king g2 is not good because of this fork. So Carlsen played knight d2. And here, this was a critical moment in the game. Apparently, Karjakin only took 1 minute to play d5, which he, I guess, had already thought about earlier and then just played it quickly. But here, in fact, he could have forced a draw right away with the move knight takes f2, which is, of course, a move you would check because you're taking a pawn of check. Always check moves like that, moves that take something or moves that give check needs to be considered, and this move does both. Takes a pawn and gives a check. And so what's going on here? Well, first, black is in this pin. So if king g1, okay. Black can just play knight h3. When king h1, the knight can come back. And king g2, there's now knight f4 check. And this is forcing white to give up the rook, because otherwise you lose material. And then we have this position, and black has a rook and 2 pawns against the 2 white knights. And if anybody's better here, it's black. The black pawn structure is very nice and intact. The knights don't have any strong outposts. Knights always want outposts, and they don't have any here. And black can think about pushing his pawns, but really, yeah, no worries whatsoever for black. And Karjakin, I believe, said in a press conference that he wasn't sure about his position, which is surprising to me because it is pretty clear that black can be not worse at all here. And I think what happened was that he believed his opponent here. He had too much respect. And that's why he didn't go for this. The other move that you have to check, of course, king g2, when knight h3 doesn't work, but there's knight h4, very nice move. And now white needs to play king g1, and now this is once again possible and a repetition. If g takes h4, you don't want to do this because there's queen g6 check, and white has to give back the piece, and now black is clearly better here. So huge missed opportunity for Karjakin to just finish the game right here pretty much, because I believe Carlsen said he would have made the draw clearly, because like I pointed out already, the other position is better for black. So d5. Now queen h5. In fact, this is allowing knight takes f2 once again. White should go f3 here and not allow knight takes f2 anymore. But to be clear, here Karjakin didn't play knight takes f2 once again. Here it is more difficult to see because after king g2, after king g1, queen g5 you can spot pretty quickly, I would say. The point is that the queen is attacked, and after queen takes g5, black has this intermediate move and then takes the queen. But what you need to see is that after king g2, you just play queen f7. And finally enough, there's the threat knight f4. If now queen e2, we transpose to what we just saw with knight h4 once again. And after king g1, black just plays queen f6. And funnily enough, there's nothing white can do to stop this queen g5 except for go back to g2 again. So this would have been a second chance for black to force a draw right away, pretty much. Yeah. But I guess if Karjakin didn't play the first time, he didn't play the second time either, and he went back. And now Carlsen played h4, which he didn't have to at this point yet. There was no need to push the knight. And the commentators were speculating if he miscalculated something, because here white can also just play rook ae1. And this is a much better version because the knight is not well placed on g5 anyway, and white can still play h4 later. It's knight g4 in position, and if black plays knight f3 now, then there's knight g4. And after queen g5, we get a similar endgame as we see it in the game, but just even better for white because black has another double pawn in his position. So Carlsen played h4, knight f3, and here he actually took a think, but he has to play knight takes f3, and he did. Knight g4, just queen f7. That doesn't really help the white position here. So we get into his endgame, king g2. And what to say about this endgame? Well, equal material, but the position is not equal because black has these double pawns in the center. And this is a liability, clearly. White can press here, white can try something. And this is exactly one of the positions in which Carlsen usually excels. Rook fe1 played, it's another strange move, which Karjakin did not exploit. He played h5 here. And the problem with this move is that after rook af8, you need to play a weird move. Either you need to go back or play knight d1, both moves that you don't really want to play. Probably Carlsen wanted to go rook e2, but had missed that here black can take on e4 and has this little trick, knight f4, and after g takes, e takes f4, this threat, and black regains the piece and is no worse at all. But Karjakin missed that. He played h5, which is a move I'm not sure about anyway. I mean, it takes away the g4 square, but is weakening the g5 square, so trade-off. Now knight f1, and in this phase of the game, both players are improving their pieces, and the knight is coming to f3. Also, this is interesting here. Black could have also started with rook af8 to stop knight f3, knight g5. But maybe something here Karjakin didn't like. I don't know. Okay, the knight coming to g5 is also not the end of the world, but a little bit unpleasant maybe. Rook a1, rook e8, knight f3, knight h8, improving the position of the knight. Now d4. White is exchanging the double pawn in the center, but he knows that he will gain some space here at some point with e5. And that's what he's banking on. Banking on? Is that how you say it? Anyways, now g6 played. White has this threat of taking on d5 right now, and black would like to take back with the e pawn, so you need to cover the f5 square. So g6, rook e3, and now e5 check, king d7. And here Carlsen played rook f3. He probably should go b4 right away just to win some space on the queen side and have this idea, which we'll actually see later in the game, but it was most precise to do it directly. Because after rook f3, here Karjakin went knight h6, but he could have gone c5 now and stopped this idea of white going b4 himself. Probably he didn't want to give the b5 square, but I guess it's not too big of a deal. Even though, yeah, admittedly, that looks a little bit unpleasant, but certainly would have been better to do this over allowing white to go b4. Also, there's another move here. It's also move g5, quite interesting. Okay, let's follow the game. Knight h6, rook f6, rook g7. Now Carlsen goes for b4, gaining space on the queen side and still keeping the pressure, definitely. Black has to defend here. The rook is pushed out, and a5, kind of fixing the pawn structure here, getting some more space. Knight f5. Of course, white is keeping the knights and transferring his knight to c5. Also, that's why a5 was useful to stop any b6. And here we have a maneuvering phase. Both players are improving their position, or rather, black plays a lot of waiting moves and is also stopping white's plans here. Was trying to. And we get to a critical moment in a second. So here, at this point, actually Carlsen could have gone b5. but probably what he didn't like is that black can transfer knight to c4. So he played rook dd3, rook h8, rook b1, and here, this was another critical moment. Here Karjakin played rook h7 back. And in a press conference he said he thought Carlsen just wanted to make the time control because they would gain another 15 minutes after move 60, and this move 56. And he played rook h7, after which b5 is quite strong. Black needs to play something else here. King a8 is possible, but to my mind a little bit artificial, computer-esque. Rook f8 maybe. Of course, that is allowing g4, since the rook is not threatening the pawn on h4 anymore. But black retreats with the knight to h6, and now knight f7. Of course, as always with the computer, it is easier to defend than as a human, but it all holds. Or here, white can also try still b5, and the difference is that with the rook on f8 instead of h7, now the rook can come to play right away, and that's a key difference. And still, white is better, no doubt, but black is holding on and defending. After rook h7, b5, black is in trouble. Okay, now b6 is a threat, and you can't allow that followed by a6, and the white piece coming in, so you have to take. Karjakin did so. But now rook b6 is a huge threat going after this pawn on e6. And something black can't really deal with. Karjakin played d4 and is trying to see counterplay. And he has defended bad positions earlier in this match in the games 3 and 4. So by no means over. Rook c3, and white shouldn't take this rook off because black would gain a passed pawn on c3. So knight f4, good move by Carlsen, keeping control, also targeting pawn on g6. And Karjakin went rook hc7, and now knight d5. And this is now taking a pair of rooks off the board, and Carlsen had calculated this line and was quite happy about it. So here, if rook takes f3, knight b5 check is coming, and king b8 a6 is very strong, and white takes on b7, and this pawn will win for white. And king a8, just rook f6 and rook f8 check is hard to stop. So Karjakin played king b8 and king c8 to get out of this. But now white takes on g6, black takes on f3, king g2, rook b3, and now entering this rook endgame with knight d6. Knight takes, rook takes d6. And rook endgames have a huge draw tendency. There's this famous saying, all rook endgames are drawn. But this one is not. White is up a pawn still, obviously. But it's very concrete here. Karjakin played rook e3. He could have also tried rook b5, but then e6, king c7, and now, one way to win is rook takes d4, rook takes a5, e7, rook e5, rook d5. Cannot be taken because of queen, and this is winning with the two connected pawns. Or also, I think, in this position, e7, rook e5, rook takes d4, rook takes e7, rook d5 would lead us to a similar position than what we see in the game. So what do we see in the game? Rook e3 was played, rook takes e6, excuse me. That's important to have the rook take on e6 so that white can put the rook to d5, and the rook is just perfectly placed here on the 5th rank, protecting the pawn on a5 and attacking the pawn on h5. So black defends, but now white can just advance with his king, and the white is just too active here. King f4, king g5, and king f6, and here Karjakin, for the first time in the match, resigned, and Carlsen won this game and leveled the score. What is going on here? Well, white is threatening king g7, picking up another pawn, and if rook g8, simply rook g5. All the pawn endgames, of course, winning, and white will just win this pawn h5. There's no more counterplay for black, no more chances. So that's why Karjakin resigned. So the score is 5-5 after 10 games, 2 more games to go, and really absolutely anything can happen. We could see tiebreaks, we could see Karjakin win or Carlsen win. It's completely open. Such a huge win, of course, for Carlsen, coming back into a match, winning finally the first game in this match, and that was just key. And the game itself, had this curious moment where Karjakin could have forced a draw and he missed it, and this might hunch him, of course. And also in the end game, at some points it was expected that Karjakin would crack under pressure, and here we saw it finally. A nice endgame technique by Magnus Carlsen, and then this time when he got the winning advantage, he didn't let it go anymore and converted convincingly. All right, that was my analysis for game 10, of course. And tomorrow's the rest day, and game 11 will be on Saturday. I'll see you again then. Goodbye.